The ship dropped out of hyperspace, and Kang Tae-ho saw Valdros Prime for the first time through the observation window. The planet glowed like a blue jewel against the darkness of space. Massive rings of silver metal circled it, each one a space station larger than any city on Earth. Ships moved between them like fireflies, thousands of them, coming and going from a world that had known civilization when humans still lived in caves. Tae-ho was 26 years old. By human standards, he was young but accomplished. He had finished his engineering studies at 19 and spent the next 7 years working on problems that most scientists said were impossible to solve. His specialty was stars, not traveling to them, but understanding them. Fixing them when they started to die. "We're receiving landing clearance," said Captain Park Yuna from the pilot seat. She was a woman of 32 with sharp eyes and a quick temper. She had known Tae-ho since their academy days, and she had volunteered for this mission because she did not trust anyone else to bring him safely to this alien world. "How do you feel?" she asked without turning around. Tae-ho considered the question. "Nervous," he admitted. "But ready." Yuna laughed softly. "Nervous is smart. These Valdrosians have been building empires since before our ancestors discovered fire. They think we're insects." "I know. And you're still going to walk into their throne room and ask for their help?" "I'm going to offer them ours," Tae-ho corrected gently. "There's a difference." The ship descended through the atmosphere. Below them, the capital city spread across the horizon like a forest of crystal and light. Towers rose so high they seemed to touch the clouds. Gardens floated in the air between buildings, held up by technology that human scientists still could not explain. Everything was beautiful. Everything was designed to make visitors feel small. Ambassador Ha Dong-wook met them at the landing platform. He was an older man, 63 years old, with gray hair and a face marked by decades of difficult negotiations. He had served as humanity's representative to the Galactic Coalition for 15 years. In that time, he had learned many things about the aliens they now lived among. Most of those lessons had been painful. "Tae-ho," he said warmly, embracing the younger man. "It's good to see you. How was the journey?" "Long," Tae-ho replied. "But I used the time to review my proposal again." Dong-wook nodded slowly. His eyes held a shadow of worry that he tried to hide. "Good. That's good. You'll need every advantage." He glanced around at the Valdrosian guards who stood at a distance, watching them with cold, golden eyes. "Walk with me. We should talk before your audience with the Queen." They walked through corridors of white stone that seemed to glow from within. Valdrosians passed them occasionally. Tall beings with pale blue skin and eyes like liquid gold. They moved with a grace that made human walking look clumsy. Most of them did not even glance at the humans. Those who did looked at them the way a person might look at a stray animal that had wandered into their home. "The Queen is young," Dong-wook explained quietly. 200 cycles old, which is about 26 in human years. But don't let that fool you. Valdrosians are born with the memories of their ancestors. She carries 40,000 years of knowledge in her mind. She has ruled for only 10 years, but she rules well. Her people respect her. "And what does she think of humans?" Tae-ho asked. Dong-wook was silent for a moment. "She thinks we are children. Clever children, perhaps, but children nonetheless. Our entire civilization is younger than some of the furniture in her palace. Our lives are so short that by the time we learn anything useful, we die. That is how she sees us." Tae-ho absorbed this without visible reaction. "I understand. Do you?" Dong-wook stopped walking and faced him directly. "Tae-ho, I have spent 15 years trying to earn respect from these people. I have failed. Every human who has come here has failed. They smile at us, they trade with us, but they do not see us as equals. They never will." "Then why did you agree to let me come?" the old ambassador sighed. "Because your work is brilliant. Because if anyone can make them listen, it might be you. And because..." He hesitated. "Because I am tired of watching humanity bow its head. Maybe it's time someone showed them what we really are." They reached a great hall where human staff had prepared a small embassy section. It was modest compared to the surrounding Valdrosian architecture, but it was clean and functional. Tae-ho would stay here until his audience with the queen. That night, Tae-ho could not sleep. He stood by the window and looked out at the alien city. Somewhere in the tallest tower, the queen was probably doing the same, looking out at her empire, thinking about tomorrow's audiences, making decisions that affected billions of lives. He thought about his proposal. A star system was dying, its sun was collapsing slowly, and within 50 years, it would explode. 20 billion people lived in that system, humans and Valdrosians both. The humans could not save it alone. The Valdrosians could, but they would not act without reason. Tae-ho had spent 3 years developing a theory that could stabilize the star. He had run the calculations 1,000 times. He knew it would work, but he needed Valdrosian technology to implement it. He needed their help. Tomorrow, he would ask for it. Captain Yuna found him still standing at the window when morning came. She brought him tea and stood beside him in silence. "Whatever happens today," she said finally, "I want you to know that I'm proud of you. We all are. Earth is proud." Tae-ho smiled faintly. "Let's wait and see what happens before we talk about pride." "No," Yuna said firmly. "I'm saying it now. Because you deserve to hear it before you walk into that room. You are the best of us. Tae-ho, whatever they say, whatever they do, don't forget that." He looked at her. This woman who had crossed the galaxy to stand beside him, and felt grateful beyond words. "Thank you," he said softly. An hour later, dressed in the simple, formal clothes of Earth's diplomatic corps, Kang Tae-ho walked toward the throne room of Valdros Prime. Guards opened doors of solid crystal before him. A herald announced his name in a language older than human civilization. And 26 years old, alone among giants, he stepped forward to meet the queen. The throne room of Valdros Prime was the most beautiful place Kang Tae-ho had ever seen. Pillars of living crystal rose toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into soft golden light. The floor was made of stone that showed images of the galaxy, stars and planets moving slowly beneath his feet, as if he walked on space itself. Along both sides of the great hall, hundreds of Valdrosian nobles stood in silence, their golden eyes fixed upon the small human who walked between them. At the far end of the room, upon a throne carved from a single massive diamond, sat Queen Lyrian. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Her skin was the pale blue of winter sky, and her hair fell like silver water past her shoulders. Her eyes were gold like all her people, but brighter, sharper, filled with an intelligence that seemed to see through everything. She wore robes of white and silver that moved like living things around her. She was 200 years old. She would live for thousands more. And she looked at Tae-ho the way one might look at an interesting insect. "You may approach," she said. Her voice was soft but carried perfectly through the vast hall. Tae-ho walked forward until he stood at the proper distance from the throne. He bowed exactly as Dong-wook had taught him. Not too deep, not too shallow. A bow of respect between equals. A few nobles laughed quietly at that. Equals. The very idea amused them. "Kang Tae-ho," the queen said, reading from a small floating screen beside her throne. "Representative of the Human Galactic Relations Council. Age 26 Earth years. You have requested this audience to present a proposal regarding stellar stabilization in the Korath system." "That is correct, Your Majesty," Tae-ho replied. His voice was calm and clear. "The Korath system contains both human colonies and Valdrosian trade stations," the queen continued. "Its star is dying. You believe you have a solution." "I do, Your Majesty. If you will permit me to explain." The queen waved one elegant hand. "Proceed." Tae-ho had practiced this moment for months. He activated his portable display and began to explain his theory. He spoke of stellar physics, of energy patterns, of the delicate balance that kept a star alive. He showed his calculations, 3 years of work compressed into clear, simple images that even non-scientists could understand. He spoke with passion. He spoke with precision. He explained how human and Valdrosian technology could work together, how they could save 20 billion lives, how this could be the beginning of true cooperation between their peoples. When he finished, The room was silent. Queen Lyrian studied his display for a long moment. Then she looked at him with those golden eyes, and Teho felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Is this what passes for science on Earth?" she asked. The words hit him like a physical blow. But he did not move. "Your Majesty?" I asked a question. The queen rose from her throne and descended the steps slowly, gracefully, until she stood before him. She was taller than him by a head. She looked down at him with something between amusement and contempt. "This theory you present, did you develop it yourself?" "Yes, Your Majesty. Over 3 years of research." 3 years. She turned to her court and smiled. It was not a kind smile. 3 years. How precious. Tell me, human, do you know how long our children study basic stellar mechanics before they are allowed to speak of it publicly? Teho said nothing. 50 years, the queen answered. 50 years of study before they may offer an opinion. And you come to my court, with 3 years of work, and expect us to take you seriously. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the nobles. Some of them laughed openly now. Your theory is elementary, the queen continued, her voice growing colder. A student in our academies would be embarrassed to present such work. You speak of stellar physics as if you have discovered something new, but everything you have shown us was known to my people before your species learned to make fire. She gestured, and Teho's display shut off. I wonder, she said, circling him slowly, why Earth would send you. A child. 26 years old. You will be dead before your 50th year if you are lucky. Your entire life is a brief flash. A single heartbeat in the life of our civilization. And yet you stand here, asking us to trust your judgment with the lives of billions. She stopped in front of him again. Your species calls itself intelligent. You build ships, you explore space, you believe you have earned a place among the stars. But you are mayflies playing at civilization. Your lives are so short, you cannot even learn from your own mistakes before you die. You repeat the same errors generation after generation, and you call it progress. The court laughed. The sound echoed through the crystal hall, sharp and cruel. I do not know what insult Earth intended by sending you, the queen said. Perhaps they do not realize how foolish they appear. Perhaps they truly believe that a child barely past infancy by our standards can speak as an equal in a court that has stood for 40,000 years. She returned to her throne and sat down, looking at him with cold finality. Your proposal is rejected. You may leave. Teho stood perfectly still. His heart was beating fast, but his face showed nothing. Around him, he could feel the eyes of hundreds of nobles, waiting for his reaction, waiting for the human to cry, to beg, to show the emotional weakness that aliens expected from his kind. He thought of Ambassador Dong-wook, who had spent 15 years swallowing such insults. He thought of Captain Yuna, who was probably watching this through the embassy's monitors. Her hands clenched in fury. He thought of Earth, billions of humans who would never know what happened in this room. And he thought of the 20 billion people in the Korath system who would die because of this moment. The queen watched him with a small smile. She expected anger. She expected tears. She expected him to argue, to plead, to give her more entertainment for her court. Instead, Kang Tae-ho did something that surprised everyone in that room. He bowed. It was the same bow he had given when he arrived. Respectful. Proper. The bow of one equal to another. Then, without a single word, he turned away. He walked back down the long hall, past the laughing nobles, past the crystal pillars, past the images of galaxies beneath his feet. His footsteps were steady. His back was straight. He did not hurry. He did not hesitate. He simply left. The laughter in the court began to fade. Something about his departure felt wrong to them. They had seen diplomats humiliated before. They always reacted. They shouted. They wept. They made threats they could not keep. Their emotions spilled out of them like water from a broken cup. This human had shown them nothing. Queen Lyrian watched him go, and for a reason she could not explain. She felt a strange unease settle in her chest. The doors closed behind him with a soft sound, and the silence he left was louder than any words. Captain Park Yuna was waiting outside the throne room when Taeho emerged. She had watched everything through the embassy's monitoring system. Her face was pale with anger, her hands trembling at her sides. She wanted to storm into that hall and tell the queen exactly what she thought of her and her ancient civilization. But when she saw Taeho's face, she stopped. He looked tired. Not broken. Not defeated. Just tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. He walked past the Valdrosian guards, without looking at them. He walked past the beautiful corridors without seeing them. He walked like a man who had put everything he had into something, and watched it crumble to nothing. Taeho, Yuna said softly, falling into step beside him. Not here, he replied quietly. Please. They walked in silence through the Crystal City, back to the human embassy, back to the small rooms that suddenly felt like the only safe place on this alien world. Ambassador Dong-wook was waiting for them. He had watched too. His old face was heavy with sorrow. I'm sorry, he said as Taeho entered. I should have prepared you better. I should have warned you more clearly what she was capable of. Taeho shook his head. You did warn me. I knew what might happen. I chose to come anyway. That woman, Yuna burst out, unable to contain herself any longer. That arrogant, cruel, heartless woman. How dare she speak to you like that? How dare she dismiss 3 years of your work without even looking at it properly? We should file a formal protest. We should demand an apology. We should. No. The word was quiet but firm. Taeho sat down heavily in a chair and looked at his hands. We will do nothing, he said. We will pack our things, return to Earth, and continue our work. But the Karith system, Dong-wook said. 20 billion people. I know. Taeho closed his eyes. I know. And I will spend every day thinking about them. But we cannot force the Valdrosians to help us. We can only do what we can do, with what we have. Yuna knelt beside his chair. Taeho, please. At least let me say something. Let me tell them that what she did was wrong. Taeho opened his eyes and looked at her with a gentleness that made her heart ache. Words given to those who won't hear them are wasted, he said quietly. She had already decided to reject us before I walked into that room. Nothing I said, nothing you could say, would change her mind. Some people can only hear themselves. The human ship left Valdros Prime the next morning. No one came to see them off. The Valdrosian authorities processed their departure with cold efficiency, and within hours, the blue jewel of an alien world was shrinking behind them. But on that world, something strange was happening. Queen Lyrian sat alone in her private chambers, staring out at the city she ruled. She had dismissed dozens of diplomats in her 10 years as queen. Humans, yes, but also representatives of other young species who came seeking favors, begging for scraps from the Valdrosian table. She had sent them all away with sharp words and sharper lessons about their place in the galaxy. They had all reacted, every single one. Anger, tears, desperate arguments, threats they could not carry out. Their emotions had poured out of them, confirming everything she believed about lesser species. They were weak. They were unstable. They could not control themselves. The human had shown her nothing. She kept seeing his face in her mind. The moment when she expected him to break, to reveal his true nature. Instead, there had been only calm. Deep, unshakable calm. He had bowed to her with perfect courtesy, as if she had not just torn his life's work to pieces in front of hundreds of people. And then he had walked away. No protest, no plea, no curse, just silence. And somehow, that silence was louder than anything he could have said. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Her younger brother, Prince Corveth, entered without waiting for permission. He had always been informal with her, even when they were children. She tolerated it because, in truth, she valued his honesty. You're troubled, he observed, sitting across from her. I am not troubled. I am thinking about the human. She did not answer, which was answer enough. Corveth leaned back and studied his sister. I was there, you know. I watched the whole thing. I watched you tear him apart. He deserved it. His proposal was simplistic. His assumptions were flawed. Were they? Corveth raised an eyebrow. I'm not a stellar physicist, but I've spoken to some who are. They said his theory was actually quite interesting. Elementary in some ways, yes. But creative. Promising. Worth exploring at least. Lyrian's eyes narrowed. Are you saying I was wrong? I'm saying you decided he was worthless before he opened his mouth. Because he was human. Because he was young by our standards. Because it pleased the court to laugh at him. He paused. Was that justice, sister? Or was it entertainment? You go too far. Perhaps. Corveth stood up and walked to the window. But consider this. The Valdrosians pride ourselves on emotional control. It is the foundation of our civilization. We believe that lesser species are ruled by their feelings, while we have mastered ours. He turned to face her. That human stood in your throne room while you humiliated him in front of the entire court. Every word you spoke was designed to hurt him, to break him, to make him show weakness. And he gave you nothing. He controlled himself more completely than most nobles twice his age. Lyrian said nothing. So tell me, sister. If emotional control is the measure of civilized beings, what does that make him? He left without waiting for an answer. That night, Queen Lyrian could not sleep. She stood at her window and watched ships come and go from her world, tiny lights moving against the darkness. Somewhere out there, a human ship was carrying Kang Tae-ho back to Earth. Back to his short life. Back to his small planet. She told herself she had done the right thing. Humans were children. They needed to learn their place. It was not cruelty. It was education. But she could not forget his eyes. In that final moment, before he turned away, she had seen something in them. Not anger, not hatred, not even sadness. Understanding, as if he had looked at her, seen exactly what she was, and simply accepted it. As if he had expected nothing better. As if her cruelty had confirmed something he already knew about her. That look haunted her more than any curse could have. For the first time in her reign, Queen Lyrian wondered if she had made a mistake. But pride is a heavy chain, and she was not ready to admit it. Not yet. So she pushed the thought away, buried it deep, and told herself that the human was nothing. That his silence meant nothing. That his eyes meant nothing. She almost believed it. 5 years passed. Kang Tae-ho returned to Earth and did not speak of what happened on Valdros Prime. When journalists asked about his mission, he simply said it was unsuccessful and changed the subject. When colleagues asked about the Queen, he said nothing at all. He buried the memory of that day deep inside himself and focused on the only thing he could control, his work. The Korath system was beyond his reach now. Without Valdrosian technology, he could not save those 20 billion lives. The thought kept him awake at night for months. He would lie in bed and calculate the years, the decades, the slow countdown to destruction. But guilt without action is just suffering, and Tae-ho had never been good at suffering quietly, so he found other problems to solve. In the second year after Valdros, a human colony called New Busan faced disaster. Its sun, a small yellow star much like Earth's own sun, began to show signs of instability. The colony had 3 million people. Scientists predicted they had perhaps 10 years before the star collapsed. Tae-ho volunteered immediately. He spent 8 months studying the star. He adapted his theories, simplified his methods, found ways to work with human technology alone. It was harder. It was messier. But he refused to give up. On a cold morning in November, standing on a platform orbiting the dying star, Tae-ho activated the stabilization array he had designed. For 6 terrible hours, no one knew if it would work. Engineers watched their screens with held breath. Colonists on the planet below looked up at their sun and prayed to whatever gods they believed in. And then the star's light steadied. The readings normalized. The collapse reversed. 3 million people would live. Tae-ho did not celebrate. He checked the data 3 times, confirmed the results, then went to his quarters and slept for 20 hours. When he woke up, he started planning the next mission. Word spread quickly. The young engineer who had stabilized a dying star. The man who had saved New Busan. Within a year, he was the most famous scientist in human space. They called him the Star Mender. News programs wanted to interview him. Universities wanted to honor him. Politicians wanted to use his name for their campaigns. He refused everything. "There's work to do," he told Captain Yuna when she visited him at his research station. "Other systems are failing. Other people need help. I don't have time for speeches." Yuna watched him with worried eyes. "Taeho, you haven't stopped moving in 3 years. You haven't taken a vacation. You barely sleep. This isn't healthy." "I'm fine." "You're running from something." He stopped working and looked at her. For a moment, she saw something old and tired in his eyes. "Maybe," he admitted. "But as long as I'm running, I'm moving forward. That's enough for now." Over the next 2 years, Taeho led missions to 4 more unstable systems. He trained other engineers in his methods. He wrote papers that became required reading at every human university. He never sought credit, but credit found him anyway. When people talked about humanity's brightest minds, his name was always mentioned first. But Taeho himself seemed to shrink even as his reputation grew. He spoke less. He smiled rarely. Friends noticed that he never talked about the future, never made plans beyond the next mission. It was as if he was afraid to look too far ahead. Only Yuna knew why. "You still think about them, don't you?" she asked one night, as they sat together watching stars from the observation deck of his research ship. "The people in the Korath system." Taeho was silent for a long moment. "Every day," he said finally. "I count the years. 42 years left now. Maybe 43 if they're lucky. I could save them. Yuna, I know I could, but I can't do it alone. You've asked other species for help? Everyone who might be able to assist. The Valdrosians won't even answer my messages. The other advanced civilizations say the same thing. Too risky. Too expensive. Not their problem." He laughed bitterly. 20 billion people, and no one cares enough to try. Yuna reached out and took his hand. "You care. That has to count for something. Does it? Caring doesn't stop stars from dying." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, humanity's reputation was changing. Not through conquest or politics, but through simple acts of stubborn kindness. When disasters struck, human ships were often the first to respond. When refugees needed shelter, human colonies opened their doors. When other species had problems no one else would touch, somehow a human team would show up, willing to try. They called it humanity's madness. The short-lived species that acted as if every life mattered. The mayflies who rushed toward danger instead of away from it. It made no logical sense. A race with such brief lives should guard those lives jealously, not throw them away for strangers. But humans did it anyway. On Valdros Prime, Queen Lyrian heard the stories. The Starmender. The colony saved. The human who had become a legend in just 5 years. She recognized his name, of course. She remembered his face. Sometimes, late at night when sleep would not come, she still saw him turning away from her throne, his back straight, his silence absolute. Corvith brought her reports about him. Articles about his work. Testimonials from people he had saved. He never said anything. Just left them on her desk where she would find them. She read them all. The human she had dismissed as worthless had become one of the most celebrated scientists in the galaxy. The theory she had called elementary had saved millions of lives. The child she had mocked was now spoken of with respect even by species far older than humanity. She should have been happy. His success proved nothing. One exceptional human did not change what humanity was. They were still mayflies. They still died quickly. They still knew nothing compared to Valdros. But she was not happy, because every story about Kang Taeho reminded her of that day in her throne room. Every mention of his name echoed with the silence he had left behind. And deep in her heart, in a place she would never admit existed, Queen Lyrian was beginning to wonder if she had broken something that could never be fixed. The universe, however, was about to force her to find out. The message came on a quiet morning, marked urgent and classified. Queen Lyrian read it in her private chambers, and for the first time in her 200 years of life, she felt true fear. Valdros Prime's star was dying. The royal astronomers had discovered the problem 3 months ago and kept it secret while they searched for solutions. They had found none. The star that had warmed their world for 40,000 years, the source of all life and power in their system, was collapsing from within. They had perhaps 12 years before it exploded. Lyrian summoned her council immediately. 12 of the wisest Valdrosians in the Empire gathered in her throne room, their faces grave. They had all read the reports. They all knew what was coming. "How is this possible?" she demanded. "Our scientists monitor the star constantly. How did we miss the signs?" "The decay is coming from the core," the chief astronomer explained, his voice heavy with shame. By the time the effects reached the surface, the process was already advanced. "We have never seen this type of collapse before. Our models did not predict it." "Then fix it. You have the greatest technology in the galaxy. Surely we can stabilize our own sun." "Non. Thanks for watching." The astronomers looked at each other nervously. Finally, one of them spoke. "Your Majesty, our technology is designed to harvest energy from stars, to draw power from them, to channel their light. But we have never tried to heal a star. We do not know how." "Then learn." "We are trying, but the process is complex. Our most optimistic estimates suggest we might develop a solution in 50 years, perhaps 40 if we push our researchers to their limits." Lyrian's blood ran cold. "We have 12 years. "Yes, Your Majesty." Silence filled the throne room. 12 years. In 12 years, Valdros Prime would burn. The greatest civilization in the galaxy would end. 40,000 years of history, of art, of knowledge, of life, all reduced to ashes in the fire of their dying sun. "There must be another way," Lyrian said, her voice barely steady. "There must be something we can do." Prince Corveth stepped forward. He had been standing in the shadows, listening, waiting for this moment. "There is someone who might help," he said quietly. All eyes turned to him. 5 years ago, a human came to this court with a proposal for stellar stabilization. He claimed to have developed a method to heal dying stars. We dismissed him. Corveth looked directly at his sister. "You dismissed him?" the council murmured in shock. "A human? Help Valdros?" The idea was absurd, but Corveth continued. "Since then, this human has successfully stabilized 5 dying stars. He has saved millions of lives. He is called the Star Mender. And he is the only person in the galaxy who has ever done what we now need." "You cannot be serious," one of the council members said. "Ask a human for help? A species that barely learned to fly? Our ancestors built empires while they were still climbing trees. Our ancestors are dead," Corveth replied coldly. "And we will join them if we let pride kill us." Queen Lyrian sat frozen on her throne. She remembered. Of course she remembered. The young human with calm eyes. The proposal she had torn apart without truly reading. The silence that had haunted her for 5 years. She had been wrong. The thought was like poison in her mind, but she could not deny it any longer. The human's theory had worked. His science was real, and she had rejected him not because his ideas were bad, but because his species was young, and his life was short. "Even if we asked," she said slowly, "why would he help us?" "After what we did to him," Corveth smiled sadly. "That is what we will find out. But I have read about this human. I have followed his career. He helps everyone who asks. Even species that have treated humanity poorly. Even enemies. Why? I don't know. Perhaps that is something we need to learn from him." The council debated for hours. Pride against survival. Tradition against necessity. Some argued that death was preferable to begging help from mayflies. Others said that survival was the first duty of any civilization. In the end, Queen Lyrian made the decision alone. She would send a message to Earth. Not a demand, not an order, but a request. She would ask for Kang Tae-ho by name. She would humble herself before the human she had humiliated, and hope that he was better than she had been. It was the hardest decision she had ever made. The message was sent that night. It crossed the vast distances between stars, carrying with it the fate of an entire civilization. On Earth, Kang Tae-ho was preparing for another mission when the transmission arrived. He was 31 years old now, tired in ways that went beyond his body, carrying the weight of countless lives saved and countless more he could not reach. He almost deleted the message without reading it. Valdros had never responded to his communications before, but something made him open it. He read the Queen's words once, then twice, then a third time, just to be sure he understood. Valdros Prime was dying. The greatest civilization in the galaxy was facing extinction, and they were asking him for help. Him, the mayfly, the child, the insect, who had been laughed out of their throne room. He sat alone in his quarters for a long time, thinking. Outside his window, stars burned in the endless darkness. Each one was a furnace of unimaginable power. Each one was fragile in ways that most people never understood. Captain Yuna found him there hours later. "I heard about the message," she said softly, sitting beside him. "The whole station is talking about it. Valdros, asking humans for help. It's impossible, and yet here we are. What are you going to do?" Tae-ho was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to look at her. "Do you remember what the Queen said about us? That we were mayflies. That our lives were too short to matter. That we were playing at civilization." "I remember." Yuna's voice was tight with old anger. "I remember every word. She was wrong about many things, but she was right about one." Tae-ho stood and walked to the window. "Our lives are short. We don't have time for grudges. We don't have time for revenge. We don't have time to wait for people to become worthy of our help." He turned back to face her. 20 billion Valdrosians live on that world. Children who never mocked us. Old people who never laughed at us. Ordinary people who just want to see another sunrise. His voice was quiet, but firm. "How can I let them die because their queen was cruel to me?" "Tae-ho, prepare the ship," he said. "We're going back to Valdros." The human fleet arrived at Valdros Prime on a morning that the Valdrosians would remember for centuries. 20 ships dropped out of hyperspace together. Not warships bristling with weapons, but engineering vessels loaded with equipment and scientists and hope. They came in formation, lights blinking in the darkness, and the Valdrosians watching from their space stations could not believe what they were seeing. The mayflies had come to save them. Queen Lyrian watched from her palace as the human ships approached. She had not slept in days. Since sending her message, she had tormented herself with questions. Would he come? Would he refuse? Would he make demands they could not meet? Would he take revenge for what she had done to him? She deserved revenge. She knew that now. Every sleepless night had forced her to confront the truth she had hidden from herself for 5 years. She had been cruel, not because she needed to be, not because it served any purpose, but because it pleased her to see the human suffer. She had enjoyed his pain. What kind of ruler did that make her? The human ships landed at the same platform where Tae-ho had arrived 5 years before. This time, thousands of Valdrosians gathered to watch. Some came out of curiosity. Some came out of hope. Many came because they could not believe that the species they had mocked would actually help them. Kang Tae-ho walked down the ramp of his ship and stepped onto Valdrosian soil for the second time in his life. He was 31 now. His face was older, marked by years of hard work and harder choices, but his eyes were the same. Calm, clear, showing nothing. Queen Lyrian had come to meet him personally. It was an honor she had never given to any foreign representative. She stood at the edge of the platform, surrounded by her guards, her silver robes moving in the wind. She looked at the human she had humiliated, and found she could not speak. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Tae-ho bowed. The same bow he had given 5 years ago. Respectful, proper, the bow of one equal to another. "Your Majesty," he said simply, "show me to your scientists. We have work to do." No anger, no accusations, no reminder of what she had done to him. Just work. Lyrian felt something twist in her chest. She had prepared herself for many things. Cold words, demands for apology, conditions that would shame her people. She had not prepared for kindness. "Follow me," she managed to say. The next weeks were the hardest of Teho's life. Valdros Prime's star was in worse condition than he had expected. The collapse was accelerating. His original timeline of 12 years had shrunk to 8. He worked around the clock. He met with Valdrosian scientists and explained his methods. At first, they looked at him with doubt. This was a human. What could a human teach them? But as he showed them his calculations, as he demonstrated his techniques, their doubt turned to amazement. The human's theory was elegant. Simple in some ways, yes, but brilliant in its simplicity. He had found solutions that Valdrosian scientists had never considered, not because they were beyond them, but because they had never thought to look. Captain Yuna watched Teho push himself harder than she had ever seen. He slept perhaps 3 hours a night. He ate when others reminded him. He answered every question, solved every problem, never once complained about the weight on his shoulders. One night, she found him alone on an observation deck, staring at the dying star. "You're going to kill yourself at this pace," she said. "No, I'm not." He did not turn around. "I'm going to save them." "Why?" The question burst out of her before she could stop it. "Why do you care so much about these people? They laughed at you. They called you an insect. That queen stood in front of her whole court and told you that your life was worthless." "I know. Then why help them? Why not let them burn?" Teho was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "My grandmother used to tell me a story when I was young, about a man who was walking through the forest and found a wolf caught in a trap. The wolf had bitten people before. It was dangerous. Everyone said to leave it there. Let it die." He turned to face Yuna. "But the man freed the wolf anyway. And when his neighbors asked him why, he said, the wolf was cruel because it was hurt. Now it has seen kindness. Maybe it will remember." Yuna shook her head. "That's a nice story, Teho. But this is real life. People don't change because you're kind to them. Some do." He smiled faintly. "And even if they don't, that's not the point. I don't help people because they deserve it. I help people because that's who I want to be. The Queen's cruelty is her choice. My kindness is mine." Meanwhile, Queen Lyrian was watching. She watched the human work himself to exhaustion. She watched him treat her scientists with patience and respect, even when they dismissed his ideas. She watched him refuse comfortable quarters, choosing instead to sleep in the engineering section so he could be closer to his work. She watched, and she remembered every word she had said to him 5 years ago. One evening, she came to him directly. He was reviewing data in a small office, surrounded by screens showing numbers she did not understand. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "I need to understand something," she said finally. "Your Majesty, why did you come?" Her voice cracked slightly, betraying the emotion she was trying to hide. "After everything I said, everything I did, you could have refused. You could have made demands. You could have asked for my public apology, my throne, anything. Why did you just come?" Teho studied her for a long moment. "Your children didn't mock me," he said quietly. "Your elderly didn't mock me. The farmer in your valleys didn't mock me. The artist in your cities didn't mock me. 20 billion people live on this world, and only a few hundred of them were in that throne room." He turned back to his work. "Why should they die for your pride?" The words hit her like a blow. Not cruel words, not angry words, just truth, simple and undeniable. She stood there in silence, and for the first time in 200 years, Queen Lyrian of Valdros did not know what to say. So she did the only thing she could. She stayed. She pulled up a chair, sat beside the human who should have hated her, and asked him to explain his work. And slowly, quietly, she began to learn. The day of the stabilization came with clouds over Valdros Prime. It was fitting. Some thought, if the operation failed, there would be no more clear skies to miss. Taeho had not slept in 3 days. His eyes were red, and his hands trembled slightly as he worked. But his mind remained sharp. He had done this before. He could do it again. He had to do it again. The engineering platform floated high above the planet, close to the dying star. Hundreds of Valdrosian and human technicians worked side by side, following Taeho's instructions. It was strange to see them together, two species that had barely spoken 5 years ago, now united by the simple need to survive. Captain Yuna stood at Taeho's side. She had refused to leave him, even when he ordered her to safety. "If we burn," she had said, "we burn together." Queen Lyrian was there too. She had insisted on being present, despite the danger. This was her world. These were her people. If there was any chance of dying today, she would face it with them. The stabilization array was massive, larger than anything Taeho had built before. It had taken 3 months to construct, 3 months of sleepless nights and impossible problems, and moments when everyone thought it could not be done. But it was done now. The array floated in space like a ring of silver fire, aimed at the heart of the dying star. "We're ready," one of the engineers reported. Taeho looked at the numbers on his screen one final time. He had checked them 1,000 times. He would check them once more. Everything was in place. There was nothing left to do but try. "Activate the array," he said. The ring of silver fire blazed to life. Energy poured from it in waves, invisible to the eye but powerful beyond imagination. The array sent healing pulses into the star's core, stabilizing the collapse, reversing the decay, doing what Valdrosian science had said was impossible. For 6 terrible hours, no one knew if it would work. The star's light flickered, alarms screamed, readings jumped wildly. Technicians shouted to each other in 2 languages, human and Valdrosian voices mixing in the chaos. Taeho stood at the center of it all, calm and still. He watched the data. He made adjustments. He refused to let fear control him. In the 6th hour, the readings began to stabilize. In the 7th hour, the star's light steadied. In the 8th hour, the chief astronomer turned from his console with tears streaming down his blue face. "It's working," he said. "The star is healing. We're saved." The cheering started slowly at first. One voice, then another, then hundreds. Valdrosians and humans embracing each other, crying, laughing, celebrating the survival of a world. Taeho did not cheer. He stood by his console, watching the numbers settle into safe ranges, and felt something release in his chest that had been tight for months. Years. He had done it. They had done it. 20 billion people would live. He thought of his grandmother's story, about the wolf in the trap. He wondered if kindness could really change things. A hand touched his shoulder. He turned to find Queen Lyrian standing beside him. Her golden eyes were bright with tears she was trying not to shed. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." He nodded once. "You're welcome." 3 days later, Queen Lyrian called a formal assembly in the Grand Celestial Hall. It was the same room where she had humiliated Kang Taeho 5 years before. The same crystal pillars, the same floor of stars, the same diamond throne. Every noble in the empire was present. Ambassadors from a dozen species had come to witness. The entire galaxy was watching. Taeho stood in the center of the hall, as he had stood once before. He wore the same simple clothes of Earth's diplomatic corps. His face showed the same calm expression, but everything else had changed. Queen Lyrian descended from her throne. She walked slowly across the floor of stars, until she stood before the human who had saved her world. And then, in front of her court, her people, and the watching galaxy, Queen Lyrian of Valdros bowed. Not a small bow. Not a polite nod. A deep bow of true respect. The kind that Valdrosian rulers only gave to their equals. 5 years ago, she said, her voice carrying through the silent hall, I stood in this room and spoke words of cruelty to a man who had come seeking cooperation. I called his science worthless. I called his people insects. I laughed at him and sent him away in shame. She straightened and looked at Taeho directly. I was wrong. About him. About humanity. About what true strength means. This man, who had every reason to hate us, crossed the stars to save our world. He worked without rest, without complaint, without asking for anything in return. He showed us more honor than we have ever shown him. She turned to face her court. Valdros owes humanity a debt we can never fully repay. From this day forward, humans will be recognized as full partners in the Galactic Coalition. With all the rights and privileges that entails, they are not children. They are not mayflies. They are equals, and they have proven it with deeds, not words. She turned back to Taeho. And I ask you now, before all these witnesses, what do you want? Wealth? Territory? Whatever is in my power to grant, I will grant it. The hall was utterly silent. Everyone waited to hear what the human would demand. Taeho considered for a moment. Then he spoke. A seat at the table, not above anyone, just beside them. That's all humanity ever wanted. Lyrian smiled. And for the first time, it was a real smile. Warm and genuine. Granted, she said, and gladly. The hall erupted in applause. Valdrosians and humans and representatives of every species celebrated together, recognizing a moment that would change history. But Taeho did not stay for the celebration. He bowed once more to the queen, then turned and walked toward the doors of the great hall. He had done what he came to do. Other stars were dying. Other people needed help. There was always more work. But before he could reach the doors, Queen Lyrian's voice stopped him. Wait. He turned. She walked toward him. Away from her throne. Away from her court. She stopped a few feet away, her golden eyes searching his face. 5 years ago. When I shamed you. Why did you never speak? Why did you just walk away in silence? Taeho looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a small, tired, genuine smile. Because words are easy to dismiss, Your Majesty. But silence makes people listen to their own. He turned and walked through the doors, leaving the queen standing alone in her hall of crystal and light. And this time, she understood. Years passed. The alliance between Valdros and Earth grew stronger than anyone had imagined. Species that had once looked down on humanity began to treat them as equals. The galaxy changed, slowly but surely, shaped by the actions of a man who had refused to let cruelty make him cruel. Kang Taeho continued his work. He saved more stars. He trained more engineers. He never sought fame or power. He simply did what needed to be done, quietly and without complaint. When people asked about him, when they wanted to know the secret of humanity's rise, Valdrosians always told the same story. The story of a young human who was mocked and humiliated and sent away in shame and came back anyway to save those who had hurt him. They did not speak of his science. They did not speak of his technology. They spoke of his silence and the strength it carried. And across the galaxy, species began to whisper a new truth about humanity. They do not forget, but they choose to forgive. And that is why they are dangerous. That is why they will inherit the stars.